Coming to you from an undisclosed location, somewhere deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains, I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. Welcome to a very special interview with Ken Johnson. Ken is the author of many different books. We go back a ways. He's been in our films. I see him at all the Prophecy Watchers Conference, and it's an honor to have him here on the show. We will be talking about this book, which I just finished a while ago, The Ancient Church Fathers, and I think you'll find it interesting. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. You probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth, folks. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risks onto you. Designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control. Until now. Folks, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect your future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold. Talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged gold IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. And folks, get rewarded for getting started. Open a qualified account at noblegoldinvestments.com, and Noble Gold will send you 2 5-ounce Silver America, the beautiful coins free. Once again, folks, noblegoldinvestments.com. Folks, hit the subscribe button right next to the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. You'll see join. If you join that, and you basically 30 cents a day, it's members only. You get 10% off on everything in the studio, lots of extra perks. Plus, when I extend the interview, it'll be members only, and you get to hop in on that. Plus, all sorts of footage. We're just starting this thing, so be patient, but we're excited about it. And a bunch of you have joined already, and we thank you for your patronage. Kim, thanks so much for coming on the record. I appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me come on.
So this is what, okay, I'm going to lament something here. So when I read a book, this is what I do with it. So all these are page numbers and little notes to myself. So woe is me, right? But when the house burned in 2018, I had a section in my library, and it was a library. I had about 1,500 books, many of them original, autographed by the authors. And the ones that really mattered had this happening at the back of the ones in a special section of a library. Those are the ones that were underlined, earmarked, dog-eared, post-its, the whole 9 yards. So I found this book really interesting, and I had never really studied the Church Fathers, and that's what's so amazing about this. But on page 17, and I'm going to go there right now, we talk about Christ consciousness. In chapter 16 of his book, The Flesh of Christ, Tertullian says, Alexander became violent in temper, left the faith, and joined the subgroup of the Ebionites. Alexander believed that Jesus was just a man with a sin nature, that there was no resurrection in the flesh, and that we can become sinless by obtaining the Christ consciousness. And what I love about this, it's like this is exactly where we are thousands of years later. And all the New Agers are going, oh, Christ consciousness, you can do it. Speak of that, Ken. Thank you.
Yeah, not much has changed. It's the same lies that the Gnostics told way back when. When I first started studying this, I decided to go through, there's 22 different Gnostic schools. They're all slightly different. And I was thinking, why am I doing this? They've been for years, or 2,000 years, right? And then I begin to realize, no, the names are changed, but the same concept is there.
Yeah. And to sort of belabor that a little bit, there's really nothing new under the sun. And I mean, and I get that. And I'm not just saying that glibly, but the whole New Age thing really came in, when I was in my teenage years. And you had Russ Tisdale used to talk about this. You had the greatest influx of occult literature in almost a generation that came in, all this Eastern mysticism, and now it's in the church, Christian yoga, whatever that is. So speak to that a little bit, if you can, please.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting to look at that because Alexander the Coppersmith is one that Paul said that he excommunicated, and hopefully he will repent. And you're always left wondering, did he kill somebody? What was so bad that he excommunicated him and not someone else? You go to Tertullian that says, well, he joined this cult. He started teaching a Christ consciousness. Jesus is not the Christ. There's a Christ consciousness. And that's not something that we can allow in our churches. I mean, you start preaching that from the pulpit, you're out of here. I mean, that's what has to be, because you're destroying the gospel. You're leading people astray. And many people did that. I think it's interesting, too. Most of those people that follow the cult ideology become violent. I mean, maybe not physically hitting you, but very arrogant, very violent in that sense. And there's other places in there. I was wondering about yoga, and I was looking through all the church fathers, couldn't find the word yoga at all because they didn't call it yoga back in the day. And that's the interesting thing about the ancient times. But they called it the gymnosophy of the Brahmas. A Brahman is, of course, in India, so they had some sort of gymnosophy or some sort of stretching or thing that had to connect you to the gods. So it's really interesting to see that.
And I want to weigh in on this just a little bit. I have literally witnessed, and I won't mention names or where I saw it or what church it was at, but I actually saw the Kundalini serpent working. I mean, it was there. Some guy blowing a little microphone, next thing you know, people are falling out and all this other nonsense. I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I believe, God can do whatever he wants to do, but I don't need some guy blowing into a microphone trying to conjure something up. And I certainly don't need the Kundalini serpent spirit working. There was a clip, and I want you to weigh in on this. I wish I could find it, but there was an expose, and this guy had a film of an Indian guru doing exactly what the so-called, ministers are doing in the Christian church, hitting people and down they go, and they're shaking violently on the floor. Well, here's the guru in India doing exactly that. No difference at all. And here's this guy at a Pentecostal meeting doing, and look, I'm not against the things of a spirit. I keep telling you that, but I will rail against and push back against the false doctrine, what's the word I'm looking for? The fake stuff, because it's there, and it's the Kundalini serpent spirit. Can you speak to that a little, please?
Yeah, Paul made it really clear. First off, you don't want to have anything fake. If there's a real gift of tongues, a real interpretation, real prophecy, there's also fake prophecy in those things. And some of it can be made up, can be psychological, some of it can be demonic. Definitely don't want to throw the real stuff out.
No.
But it's really specific. Paul made it very clear about how even if it's a real gift of the Spirit, you don't want to use it in such a way as it comes against what Christ is doing. So the whole idea is if I'm speaking in tongues or I'm doing something and it looks weird, somebody doesn't know anything about Christianity, they came in, they saw that, they turn around and they leave. On the flip side, if we make a localized prophecy and tell them who they are and that we know them, they're going to be, I don't know how he knows this.
Yeah, exactly.
I could try to investigate. So we need to do everything appropriately.
Decently and in order. So my next underlying thing was the temple to be rebuilt. So there's a whole body of people in our churches who believe in replacement theology, which is essentially the idea that the church now inherits all the promises of Israel. It doesn't matter. Israel has been cast away. It doesn't matter. Israel is not the chosen people. The church is, and the temple is within us. And so there's not going to be any literal third temple. So on page 102 of the book, there it is, folks. And Kim will tell you how to get this when we're finished. But you have Barnabas, AD 100. You can perceive that their hope is vain. Furthermore, the Lord said, behold, they who destroyed his temple, even they will again build it up once more. This prophecy was fulfilled because the Jews went to war against their enemy. But even though they are now more than servants to Rome, they will return and rebuild the temple. It was revealed that the city of Jerusalem, the temple, and the people of Israel were to be given up. And then this is what the ancient church fathers. So you have Irenaeus, the rebuilt temple will be in Jerusalem. That's AD 177. So at that point, folks, the Jews are not even allowed to set foot in Jerusalem. This is after the Bar Kokhba revolt, AD 130 roughly, and Jews are not allowed in Jerusalem. So Constantine becomes emperor, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's, Irenaeus, the rebuilt temple will be in Jerusalem. Then you got Tertullian 190 to 210, the Antichrist will be a real man and sit in a real temple. You remember, these are the church fathers. You got Origen. The prophecies in 1 Thessalonians and Daniel are real prophecies about the end of the world. They will be a literal rebuilt temple. And I just love this whole body. I mean, without picking on the Catholics, but you got 1.2 billion Catholics. They don't believe in any of this. I mean, it's all replacement theology. It's all amillennialism. And, we look at this, and this is why this book is so important, because many people, many of you are sitting out there going like, well, gee, it looks like LA is just pulling, theological rabbits out of this hat. I'm not. Ken has done the work. It's in the book. And he's quoting, and it's not cherry picking. I mean, what do you do with that? The prophecies in 1 Thessalonians and Daniel are real prophecies about the end of the world. There will be a literal rebuilt temple. And just today there was this, and I want you to weigh in on this, but there was a article, someone's putting up signs in around Jerusalem, this way to the rebuilt temple. I mean, you got the ashes of the red heifer. That's going to happen, I would predict, this year. I'm not a prophet, but I would say if they're going to do it, it's going to be soon. Over the weekend, they walked on the Temple Mount, and there were Jewish prayers there. I mean, oh my gosh, the Jews are back in the temple. It's Al-Aqsa compound. Nonsense, it's not. Al-Aqsa was a mosque that was built, 1,000, hundreds of years later. So speak to the rebuilt temple and why it's literal, please.
It's one of the signs given in Daniel, and the early church fathers all taught that it was literal. What had happened is people began to say things are symbolic. It's just something that the church does, that kind of stuff. It began fairly early, mainly from the Gnostics. And then it kind of went back and forth. And so that's why they're saying literal temple. But this is why I chose to look at the church fathers, because I would go to a Pentecostal church, a Baptist church, this one, that one, the other one, and realize there's differences. And maybe they're important and maybe they're not. But I decided to look up the disciples of the apostles first, and to look at all their sermons, whatever they said about a rapture or can you lose your salvation or not, just stuff. And then they were very clear, and you go on out another 100 to 200 years and everybody's still teaching the same thing. After the major persecutions, that's when everybody started getting different opinions. So that tells me that the basic gospel, all the questions we have, all the answers are there. And so when these guys come up and say, no, this is a real rebuilt temple, there's a 7-year tribulation period. People wonder if it's 3.5 or 7. Church fathers said it's very clear, it's 7. There's an actual Antichrist, which is a person who rules. There's 10 separate nations that come together. And they even begin to tell you stuff about how to identify them, things like that, what prophecies. And then sometimes they'll quote extra biblical prophecies too. So that's what's fascinating, to pull them all together. So you throw those in with the Dead Sea Scrolls and whatever they tell you to go look for other things. And it's actually fairly complete. So yeah, there's a literal rebuilt temple. It will be in Jerusalem. I don't know where, because there's a big debate on exactly where on the Temple Mount or the city of David and that stuff. Wherever it was is where it's going to be, I'm sure. But that's what we're looking for. And we see these things consistently. The Jews have finally said Judea and Samaria is our sovereignty.
That's it. I'm not giving that up.
Is in process of being annexed. Those are prophecies out of Obadiah and Zephaniah, and then a few other places, very specific, even to tell you that the evil seat of government in Gath of the Philistines would be called Hamas. And it even gives you, if you know the Dead Sea Scrolls, how to pinpoint the basic timeline. And it's after Israel comes back the second time. So it's not a prophecy from 3,000 years ago or anything like that. It's meant to be right now. And we have a wicked, evil government structure in Gath of the Philistines, which is Gaza Strip. They do call themselves violence, which is Hamas. And it's in process. There's even a Dead Sea Scroll prophecy that predicts they would give up that area and then take it back, and there'd be a 70-year period between the two.
Wow.
And if you look at the Sinai problem, where they first took it and gave it back, 70 years later is 2026 or 2027, depending on how you look at it. And it's in process. So all these things are amazing. Sometimes we have timeline prophecies, actual dates, and they're all being fulfilled perfectly.
You know, you talked about the second return. The first, I'm just going to fill the audience in. The first return is from the Babylonian captivity, and that's when the Jews came back into the land. The second time is 1948, May 14th. That's it, where the nation of Israel becomes a nation in one day. And that fulfills the prophecy of Amos 9, 14, and 15. And I remember Jonathan Cahn, when I quoted that to Jonathan, he looked at me like, oh my gosh. He said, L.A., are you aware that on May 14th, 1948, that scripture, Amos 9, 14 and 15, was being read in all the synagogues around the world? I had no idea of that. And just so you know, what that says is, I will bring back the captives of my people, Israel. Check. They will build the waste cities and inhabit them. Check. They will plant vineyards and drink the wine from them. Check. They will also plant gardens and eat the fruit from them. Check. Here's the kicker. I will plant them in their land, and never again will they be plucked up out of a land I had given them. The Jews are not going anywhere. And I want to make something real clear. I'm not giving the nation of Israel, the Jews that are there, a blank check. You know, many of them hate Jesus. They rail against the idea that we call him Messiah. They refuse to do that. And yet they are God's prophetic time clock. Everything hinges around the nation of Israel. Sorry, if you believe in amillennialism or replacement theology, you can never go past go. So this is from Tertullian again, and we want to talk about the book of Enoch. You know, I've stated this publicly numerous times. If you're ever going to keep one book away from the people, you keep the book of Enoch away from them, because Enoch expounds on the sin of the fallen angels in the days of Noah. And Jesus warns us it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns. And, you know, I want you to answer this too, because when Jesus says this, there is no Sethite theory. That doesn't come in until hundreds of years later, when Julius Africanus comes in and creates this thing out of thin air. And that is being taught in the churches. Meanwhile, this is what the apparel of women. So he goes, this is Tertullian AD 190. The book of Enoch is genuine scripture. It is not received by some because it is not admitted into the Jewish canon either. The Jews rejected it, like other portions of scripture, because it testifies of Christ. The fact that Jude quotes it is proof enough. This may not be the first Enoch we know today, but the one quoted by Jude. Your thoughts there, Ken?
Yeah, it's really specific. I wouldn't say necessarily it should be in scripture, because these days I follow the Dead Sea Scrolls really tight, and their idea of the Old Testament is the 39 books that we have. But they have the Old Testament, which is the public canon, and then they have the writings of the prophets, which is a separate canon. And even in Elijah, in his school, Elijah was quoted, it's in one of the fragments, that if God gave both, why can't you just read them together? You know? So in other words, you don't want to give somebody, a new believer, 10,000 books to read. They'll just throw up their hands and walk away. So you have a public canon, which is important to read. And then for us, the New Testament, which was prophesied in the scrolls also. But then the extra biblical stuff. So the stuff way before the Mosaic canon, like the writing of the patriarchs, the book of Enoch, things like that. And then the stuff in between the testaments, the other writings and the Essenes. All that stuff is important for us to figure things out, the way things are going to be toward the second coming. And there's actually a lot of detail. And yeah, it was in, most of us point back to around 160, somewhere in that neighborhood, when the Sethite, Canaanite theory came up. That's the first time it was mentioned as a solid theory. But you actually see it a couple of decades before in Gnostic literature.
Mm.
So it's this book called the Stele of Seth, and the Sethite, there was a group called the Sethites, and they were a Gnostic group. And they are the ones that started talking about angels, and Sethites were kind of the same thing and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see all of our things that we debate on or that we consider heretical or whatever. If we just go back to the church fathers, they paint a clear picture.
Very clear.
And if you could pinpoint stuff like that, it almost always goes back to some cult in the first century.
Interesting. Another interesting, I remember, I believe this raises its head, every now and then, every couple of years, somebody sends me an email with the whole idea of the serpent seed, and it says the demiurge forced Eve into sexual intercourse many times. Eve thereby gave birth to other evil creator angels. And of course, this is the whole idea of the serpent seed, where, that Eve had intercourse, that the fruit was intercourse with the dragon and everything else. And here we are. I mean, and I hear this over and over and over again. Speak to that, please.
Yeah, it's a common theory. It keeps coming up. I was surprised to learn that was a major doctrine in the Ku Klux Klan, only they twisted it and made the sign of Cain to be black skin.
Well, yeah, I've heard that too.
On their own twist on that kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, it's ridiculous. Cain and Abel were human beings from Adam and from Eve, and there was no repopulation of anything like that. We have the Genesis 6 account, which took place in the days of Jared, according to the text. So that's around 600 AD or 600 AM, 600 years from creation. We have the Lucifer fall and the Azazel fall, which were all separate things, but experimenting with genetics is one thing, and for someone to attack Eve, that's something God probably wouldn't even allow, starting off like that, because otherwise no humans would be human.
Yeah.
So it's a totally ridiculous idea.
You mentioned something with Satan and Azazel, and I continually try to get my head around this, and I'm not sure. I haven't made up my mind where I fall with it. Maybe you can clarify this. We know from the book of Enoch that the ringleader is Samyaza. So now you got three. You got Satan, you got Samyaza, and you got Azazel. Is Samyaza or Samyazi, is this the head of the fallen angels? Is he under Satan? Is it Satan himself? Explain that to us, please.
No, they're separate beings, just like Michael is not Lucifer.
Right.
So Satan fell sometime in the garden or before the garden. It's in that time period, before we get out of the garden anyway. And so that's, and he has fallen angels with him. And then later on, there was an angel named Azazel that came to earth and just started doing genetic experiments. He was over in one section. He didn't bother anything. There was no major corruption, kind of like an island of Dr. Moreau type thing. He's over here by himself. And that made the 600 people, the 600 angels, decide, well, we can do this too. They decided it was later, like 100, 200 years later, they decided to ascend on Mount Hermon. They took an oath, started doing the same thing. But when they all, 600 of them, not one person, 600 spread out and did weird genetic problems everywhere, the entire earth became corrupt. And so that was the major reason for the flood.
And this is when they're mixing their seed. They're taking women and they're genetically messing with things. I get that on the side, but they're also creating hybrids known as the Nephilim. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Okay. This is Origin, AD 248. Celsus, a pagan, harbors a secret desire to discredit the Mosaic account of creation. It teaches that the world is not yet even 10,000 years old, but in fact, Celsus teaches it is very much older than that. So what are your thoughts there?
Celsus kind of combined Hinduism and Judaism. The Jews have always said 6,000 years. Now, I know some of us believe in an old earth, but that's before human beings.
Right.
And so we're talking about from Adam to us is the only human beings on earth.
And I agree with Sally.
That's only been about 6,000 years.
Yes, that's
what the consistent early church fathers taught. Celsus came along and he tried to kind of put the two together. So in the Brahmin idea is that there are these ages of hundreds of thousands of years and different beings that populate and different. So in other words, people have been around hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And he's trying to mix the two religions together to form a cult.
And let me just weigh in here too. I mean, the earth is without form and void, and people are argue this till the cows come home. I believe that Satan and the fall created this chaos that we see in Genesis 1:1. Tohu vavohu. It's there. He's not recreating it, or he's not creating it. He's recreating it. He's restoring it. And we don't know the timeline between the fall of the dragon and 1/3 of the hosts of heaven and the recreation. Is it a year? Is it 100 years, 1,000 years, a million years? We have no idea. It is a new creation, and Adam and Eve are put in. I extend the timeline back about 10 to 12,000 years. So we differ on that. And I understand that, because when you look at a place like Sacsayhuaman, that's got to be pre-flood. The question is, how old? And then you look at places like Göbekli Tepe, same thing. Or, even some places, Peru's got a lot of them, but in Egypt, there are, for instance, underneath the pyramids, you can see it right there, right? So, what are we looking at? What are we looking at, folks? This thing, and we don't know. And look, I'm not in intellectual concrete. If it shows that if we can actually prove conclusively that men have been on the earth for 6,000 years, that's fine. But I don't know. I mean, we're looking at stuff like this, which in my opinion is pre-flood. That pushes the timeline further back. But again, I don't know. The next one is interesting. Islam. Arnobius, against the heathen. You laugh because in the ancient times the Persians worshipped rivers and the Arabians an unshaped stone. Islam teaches Jesus did not suffer and die on the cross. Someone else took his place. Ignatius, this is AD 90. Only the unsaved would teach Jesus only seemed to suffer. Unbelievers say Jesus only seemed to suffer and seemed to resurrect. Philippians 7, for whosoever does not confess the testimony of the cross is of the devil. And here we've got the Shroud of Turin. And the reason why I'm constantly bringing this up, and we've got a film on it, folks, go to lamarzulli.com, Shroud of Turin, Sudarium of Oviedo, Holy Fire. That is forensic evidence, in my opinion, of the greatest event in history. No one took Jesus' place. It was him. He went there and he suffered and he rose from the dead. Ken, your thoughts, please.
About the shroud, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I don't think it can be man-made. So that means it's most likely the shroud of Jesus Christ. It could be some sort of demonic host or trick or whatever, but that seems unlikely.
I hear
the whole idea. I mean, you can do some sort of demonic trick that might help a certain generation, but you've kind of messed yourself up. You've allowed hundreds of generations to probably come to the Lord because of it. So that doesn't sound like something that a trick would do. But the whole idea, I mean, I remember when Barry Schwartz looked at it, he was talking about it.
Right.
The whole idea, he really thought it was paint, the blood and all that stuff. Look at it, turns out it's actually blood. It's actually human blood.
Right.
It's actually male human blood.
Right.
And it just keeps on going from there. So all those things are amazing.
Folks, I'm going to stop it right here. We're going to continue the interview with Ken Johnson in just a moment. The last part of this will be for members only. So you say, LA, why do you do this? Well, the reason why I do this is because members are entitled to have extended parts of the interview. And we really rely on your contribution. It's like 30 cents a day, less than $10, slightly less than $10 a month, and you can become a member, and then you can just go to members only. You can watch this stuff. Plus, we'll be actually putting up, different. I'm actually going to do something with Gary Schultz. That name doesn't mean anything to you, but Gary was there at Area 51 before we all knew about Area 51, and he filmed the craft flying over. So that will be a members only thing coming up. So, pray about it. Consider helping us out here. And we thank you for your patronage. In the meantime, la@marzulli.com, la@marzulli.com, become a member and get 10% off on anything. Anyway, from here on out, it'll be members only.